Spring thaw is potentially devastating for some. Experts predict the possibility of major flooding along the Red River Valley is near now 100%.
John, I talked to the National Weather Service tonight, who tells me there is at least a 30% chance the Red River Valley could see flooding worse than 1997.
Latest projections from the National Weather Service say today's rain and a faster than expected snow melt will push the expected crest of the Red River to right around 40 feet. The potential of more rain now has city officials doubling the number of sandbags they need from 1 million up to 2.
Tonight, streets are closed and sandbags are furiously being filled.
Governor Pawlenty today issued a state of emergency for 7 Minnesota counties. Forecasters say weekend rain could swell the Red River to record levels.
History tries to repeat itself nearly a dozen years after the record-breaking Red River Valley floods of 1997. As concerns over flood levels in the Fargo-Moorhead area rise, the call goes out for the Minnesota National Guard to begin a flood fight mission.
We were on drill that week, but we had been preempted that we'd probably be getting called up for it. So everybody was informed to bring their duffel bags with 5 days worth of clothing and stuff. We got the call, well, we came here Friday night for a briefing saying, oh, it's not going to happen until next week. The next day we got a call saying we need 40 personnel to move out Saturday.
Before drill was over, Captain Moore and his soldiers found themselves aiding in a flood fight. On March 23, 2009, Governor Tim Pawlenty activates the National Guard in response to rising flood levels in the Red River Valley.
Well, when Minnesota has a state emergency like a natural disaster, we take great comfort and confidence knowing that we have the awesome capabilities and terrific commitment of our Minnesota National Guard to be one of the first responders, doing things from traffic control to high-end intervention and response and rescue.
The first call comes from Clay County, and 200 Air and Army National Guard members respond, a large chunk of them from the Moorhead area-based 2nd Combined Arms Battalion, 136th Infantry. Captain Moore's company headed to Breckenridge in Wilkin County soon after the call.
What we ended up doing, and I explained what our role would be in working through the JOC and the EOC with the National Guard, is we'll provide the security primarily so that the civilians can do what they need to do to protect themselves.
Planning began well before the call.
Doing assessments of what's going on. So it became obvious to us probably in the first part of the year, January, February, that things were going to that the conditions were being set in the Red River Valley for some major flooding. In March, at an emergency management conference, we met with the Division of Homeland Security Emergency Management and representatives from the National Weather Service. And that's where they started to become concerned and laid out, here is how these conditions are now stacking up and potentially could be as far off the scale as the meeting the 1997 or record level floods. So based on that projection, we started doing more detailed contingency planning and figuring out which units were we going to put into the flood fight, what kind of resources were we going to need.
I don't think that the communities of Fargo and Moorhead were as advanced into the mitigation efforts as other cities and towns along the Red, and therefore it required the most National Guard attention.
Minnesota National Guard and State Patrol are stationed at rapid response sites in Moorhead just in case of any dike breaks. They're on 24-hour standby from 3 locations: the Public Works Facility on 41.5 Street South, the old Edison School on 14th Street, and the school district's bus garage on 15th Avenue North. Each site has 2,000 sandbags ready to go. There's also a military helicopter and a 1,000-pound sandbag bomb stationed at the Moorhead Armory on the north side.
Along the Red River, troop and equipment numbers begin to increase in Wilkin, Clay, Norman, Marshall, and Polk counties in order to adequately assist local authorities in fighting the flood. Soldiers take up 24-hour operations transporting sandbags, setting up quick reaction forces, redirecting water with sump pumps, checking and charting water depth, monitoring dikes, providing security and logistical support, monitoring traffic, and evacuating people who need help.
Our first missions when we hit the ground here were sandbag security points, and there were 11 of them in the town of Moorhead. We also had some dike patrols, and then we also had traffic control points.
I sent them out on this area to walk this dike from 12th Avenue south to 32nd Avenue south. Their mission was to report on water levels. We have essentially 3 different types of dikes out there. We have the permanent dike, we have a temporary clay dike, and we have a temporary sandbag dike. They need to report back to me whether or not the water was touching those temporary dikes. Once the water goes down to the permanent dike level, there's no longer a concern about flooding within the city.
Here comes the crest, and it looks horrible. And so we were thinking, initially they were predicting a crest of 43 feet here in Moorhead, potentially. This armory right here would go under at 42.5 is what we were told. So we started sandbagging. As you can see when you walk around, there's sandbags about 2 feet high all the way around here. And that was our first mission.
The Moorhead Armory wasn't the only spot in town that was in trouble.
We have never hit that worst case scenario. We were 3 inches away from worst case scenario.
No one's quite sure what all this cold snow is going to do to the situation. We have 450 soldiers available at this point. We're prepared to ramp that up higher as need be with approval from our governor. And we're prepared, as I said, to provide emergency evacuation, to provide security to areas. Whatever needs to be done, we'll do it.
The battalion commander up there, I've never met the guy, but I need to shake his hand because he did just a terrific job. He was I think one of the success stories is that we had local commanders involved in their community that knew a lot of the people and the personages associated. I believe that the battalion commander is a school teacher up in that area, and knew a lot of the folks.
Minnesota National Guard, or the National Guard in general, continues to be a major part of this flood fight up here, and many of the men and women who are working 12-hour shifts right now are from this region. Here on the Minnesota side, 500 Guard members are patrolling neighborhoods on the ground and in the air, and a good chunk of them are based out of either Clay County, which is where Moorhead is, or neighboring Norman or Polk counties. Along with hundreds of vehicles for rescue and delivery of sandbags, they have 6 helicopters and 2 communications operation trucks to help them respond to any kind of emergency. Between Minnesota and North Dakota, there are over 2,000 National Guard troops doing exactly what they're trained to do, and people here really appreciate it.
They're very thankful we're here. We're glad to be here, and I think it's a two-way street. They're seeing that the Guard isn't just a force that goes overseas to fight when we have to, but our state mission is to help the local communities, and we're glad to be doing that.
Bearcat Talk, this is JCP-1, radio check over.
One of the resources provided by the National Guard to local officials and agencies conducting operations in Moorhead and the surrounding areas was the Joint Communications Platform Trailer, or the JPC.
Is that we might go into a community that necessarily doesn't know what type of radio frequency that they're operating on. And so with our frequency counter, we can basically see that radio frequency. It'll be able to read it, and it'll display on the handheld device. So this is actually programmed for the Moorhead Fire Department.
According to the National Weather Service on March 28th, just 5 days after the Guard entered the flood fight, the Red River crested at 40.82 feet, breaking the record level of 40.1 from 1897 and topping the 1997 level of 39.57 by nearly an inch and a half. To the north, smaller cities and towns were also facing difficult conditions as the river rose. Among them, the town of Oslo became isolated, at times only accessible by airboat and National Guard aircraft.
There is a concern about the depth of the water, when it's going to crest. It's been jumping around quite a bit. Today it's back up to 38.11 as far as 7:30 this morning goes.
2 days after the Red River's first crest, a snowstorm moved in, bringing with it winds of 25 to 40 miles an hour. Officials worried the wind would cause waves in the floodwater and put more pressure on the sandbag dikes along the river. In Oslo, there was another worry.
They took a Black Hawk helicopter with a large concrete block and used it as a battering ram, if you will.
We did have an ice jam north of town. We tried to break it up with a Chinook with a wrecking ball, with little to no effect on the ice jam. It has moved. The ice jam has moved a little farther down to the north. I think right now it's just pretty much we're in that waiting period right now to see how things are going to go. Our big concern right now is the security factor of Oslo, and that just making sure that we're doing everything in our means as Minnesota National Guardsmen to help our local communities stay safe and dry.
People in the Fargo-Moorhead area are preparing for the second crest of the Red River this week.
The second crest by mid-April could go back up to 37 to 40 feet. Plus, winds between 20 to 30 miles per hour are making many, including the mayor of Moorhead, worried.
In addition to plans to rotate troops, it was time to rotate equipment in preparation for the second crest. Vehicles from flood sites made their way to the mobilization and training equipment site at Camp Ripley.
When the river started going down, it had technically crested, so we thought that there was a possibility that number one could be the end of operations. So we ought to take advantage of this, of the river going down, to start thinking about reset and recovery. On the other hand, we've been through this before, and in 1997 there were two crests based on the weather, precipitation, temperatures. We thought there was a possibility that there could be a second crest, because the first crest happened when it was very cold, and when you flew above the ground, you looked down and you could see the river in the flooded area, but you could also see a whole lot of white, a whole lot of snow, a whole lot of slush, a whole lot of overland flooding that had been made inanimate by the cold weather. So we thought there's a very good possibility there's going to be a second crest when it warms up. That was validated by the National Weather Service. They came out and said, yep, looks like we're going to have a second one, and it could be as high and maybe even higher than the first crest. So then the staff kicked into gear and started conducting contingency plans for troop rotations and other operational considerations for a second crest.
Some of the major things that are happening is we've got CV boots that are getting torn because of the ice, breaking some of the air vent lines, which causes the access to fill up with water. Seals on the front and rear differentials on the Humvees. Those are some of the major issues that are coming back. We started inspecting vehicles up here on Monday. Got through all the 44 vehicles that came back from Moorhead. Still have 140 up in Moorhead yet.
Minnesota National Guard troops are headed back to Fargo-Moorhead to help fight the Reds' second crest. Nearly 300 soldiers from St. Paul and Cambridge will be stationed in Cass County. The Minnesota Guard is also dispatching Chinook and Black Hawk helicopters for rescues and other operations.
In the meantime, a call comes from North Dakota.
Governor of North Dakota calls the governor of Minnesota, says, hey, I need help. I don't have enough National Guard soldiers to deal with the situation. Will you please send me, in this case, 300 soldiers and 4 helicopters to deal with this? So that's pretty significant. That's historic. That's what's historic about the 2009 flood, is that we did, for the first time, execute an EMAC with another state and send our soldiers in a state active duty status to help deal with an emergency.
North Dakota and Minnesota entered into an Emergency Management Assistance Compact, or EMAC, which allowed the Minnesota National Guard to send soldiers and equipment, including a unique package of aviation assets.
We are currently in Kindred, North Dakota. We're kind of based out of the Fargo area, and our assignment is to provide quick reactionary forces to dike breaches due to flooding, and also evacuation teams to help get residents out of their flooded homes if necessary. Initially, the greatest challenge was to actually mesh the different parts of our company, the North Dakota Army engineers as well as the Air Force engineers and ourselves. And then once we were here, it was a bit of familiarization with the area. That was kind of our biggest obstacle, was just lack of knowledge of the towns and the layout of the land.
We really used an element that we didn't have in the past for a major flood fight, and that's our J5, our plans directorate. So they did a whole lot of the contingency planning and figuring out the what if and the how to, while the J3 guys, the operations folks, stayed focused on the current fight. In 1997, I was the plans and operations officer in the military support section as a major.
General Kelly wasn't the only flood veteran. Captain Chuck Moore was a Sergeant E5 in the 1997 flood, and retired Lieutenant Colonel Mr. Alan Glass, then a major, served as a battle captain. Many of the soldiers and airmen in the 2009 flood fight were veterans of Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Balkans. The highest percentage of war or overseas veterans called to state active duty since World War II.
This mission is a great example of the dual role of the National Guard. I mean, this battalion spent 16 months in Iraq 2 years ago, and that was the federal mission. Now we're back here doing a state mission, helping our fellow citizens protect their homes, protect their property.
I think if I'm not mistaken, this is kind of how the Guard got started. You know, if I'm not mistaken on it, with neighborhoods coming together and supporting each other for it on crisis matters, and then they've just developed into that. So it's going back to our roots of what the Guard is all about.
From a Guard perspective, we brought new equipment into the flood, some old equipment that has been tried and true, and that's the 900 series 5-ton trucks that can go through 60 inches of water. And the great soldiers that are willing to risk, drop what they're doing, put on a uniform, and go and walk dikes at night when everybody else is sleeping. That's special.
The 148th is very happy to support in this type of situation. You know, we have a federal and a state mission, and I think most people hear about our federal mission when we deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. And in this case, we're helping our neighbors in North Dakota and western Minnesota.
I do believe that we are always ready, whether it's for the home game or the away game. And Minnesota's citizens should feel very comfortable that we're prepared to go do the things that we're asked to do overseas, and we're certainly always ready to help here inside the state when there's an emergency.
Powerful storms in January have meteorologists and government officials predicting flooding once again in the Red River Valley.
Always ready is a promise. It's a promise to the people of Minnesota that when we're having our worst day, when the biggest disaster in our history happens, when your community, when your local area needs our help, the Minnesota National Guard will be there.
Support of the community once again. I still think it's extremely difficult to have back-to-back events,
which starts the beginning of flood season here, issued by the National Weather Service this afternoon in the southern Red River Valley, Cass and Clay counties, Richland and Wilkin counties at the headwaters of the Red River here, where things are getting started. Now, taking a peek, our rivers are rising because there's releases from the dams, but the rainfall that's taking place right now is also running off in streams and tributaries. And
the National Weather Service announced on February 19th that the Red River may reach the 100-year flood stage of 40 feet for the second year in a row.
The National Weather Service has issued a flood warning for the Red River at Fargo and Wahpeton. The river is expected to rise above flood stage over the weekend in both cities. Now, only minor flooding is forecast in Wahpeton at this point, but the river in Fargo-Moorhead is expected to rise several feet in the next week and cause moderate flooding.
We've gotten a lot of precipitation across the region. Flood watches yesterday have been upgraded to warnings.
The motto of the National Guard is always ready, and once again the Minnesota National Guard was called into action to assist local authorities in the Red River Valley.
I'm most impressed with the way that everything has been planned. I'll tell you, you learned a lot last year in the 2009 flood. It looks to me like everything in the 2010 time frame is running very efficiently and very effectively.
Preparation is the name of the game for the flood of 2010, and the people in the valley know that name far too well. Volunteers are pouring in to help and fighting to keep spirits high.
New normal, as I refer to it, is our continuing changing environment, being prepared to, in many cases on the federal mission, the new normal is our deployments. We've been deploying steadily since 01. Our state missions, as the emergence of the Homeland Security roles and so forth, we've become more proactive on the state side, getting involved that way, and then our community missions.
Leadership and direction start at the top. Brigadier General Joe Kelly has been part of the planning and leadership during many state emergencies, including the Great Flood of 1997 when he was a major.
I think we had much better preparation here at the Joint Force Headquarters in St. Paul, most notably the Joint Operations Center, the state level structure that does kind of the command and control and coordination for the flood. We learned a lot of lessons in 2009 that made the Joint Operations Center run much better.
Preparation for state emergencies began behind the scenes at the Joint Operations Center. Major Simon Shaeffer, Chief of Operations, led this group.
We started our initial planning for Flood Fight 10 back in December. We conducted some joint planning with North Dakota, since we share the Red River. We're linked with that operation. And then early in January and February, we started working with the regional reps from Homeland Security on the civilian side as well, since we support their operation.
An important improvement between 2009 and 2010 was the logistical preparation and readiness. Lieutenant Colonel Rhonda Evenson discusses the logistical preparation that took place in 2010.
A pretty good idea of the right types of equipment to be used, and we validated the location, the physical location of that equipment. Last year we had challenges with that where we would tell an organization to provide a piece of equipment and it was somewhere we didn't know where it was at. It was physically in the wrong location. So this year we did a better job of identifying where the equipment was early and what type of equipment. We didn't give them this master roster, but rather we narrowed our scope. We also pre-positioned equipment.
Keep sets of equipment and so forth near the historically significant areas of a flood fight. And that led and became, again, another evolution in planning to ensure that we worked with the local communities. We got there early. We did a detailed analysis on 2009 to make sure that we didn't, well, we knew what kind of equipment we needed, where it should be at, and we could pre-position much more effectively.
All the planning and preparation in the world is worthless without the soldiers and the NCOs on the ground working long and tedious hours.
Our soldiers did an awesome job. I'm proud of them. We had no problems, and they're going to continue to keep working. We met with the Polk County Sheriff today and the EOC over there, and they had nothing but good things to say for us. And actually they were asking for us to stay on for a while because we're giving them really good information.
Major General Larry Shellito is confident the Guard can answer any call despite the challenges of multiple overseas deployments.
That's what my wife says. She always watches TV, and every night on TV somebody somewhere is doing something. She said the other day, what would we do without the National Guard? And it just in my mind, I can't even envision how you could have a nation like ours without it.
I can think of no other organization that performs at a higher level on shorter notice with more impact than our Minnesota National Guard when it comes to events and circumstances in Minnesota that require their response. They are an incredible organization. We're so proud of them and we're grateful for them, and responding to natural disasters is yet another example of the incredible excellence and effectiveness of our National Guard, and we're grateful to each and every one of their members.